Well, good morning to you all. Lovely to see you chatting away to each other already on this beautiful morning as spring is drawing closer. The days are getting longer, and doesn't that actually change our feeling about life in so many ways when we enter times like this? As Tima says, spring bringing hope indeed. So it's a really lovely morning, and hope you'll enjoy it sometime. Be able to get out in the sunshine for a little bit of exercise. But remember, still we're at this stage of keeping distant from each other, keeping safe and secure in these times. So take care, whatever you do with your day. But we come to worship God. Later in our service, we'll be hearing reflections from Mary Ann, and that's Dan's sister, and then from Deborah. But we begin with a hymn of praise to the God who was and is and shall be forever, the same in all times, Alpha and Omega, the one who is the Ancient of Days. And so we come to our prayer. So let us pray. Generous God, we come to worship, each with our own gifts to offer to you and to one another. Hear our songs and words of praise as we bless your name. We come to worship, each with our own concerns to offer to you and to share with one another. Hear our silence and our intercessions as we bless your name. We come to worship, each with our own faith to offer to you and to strengthen one another. Hear our passion and our prayerfulness as we bless your name. And so may we bless your name as we meet together, and in those times when we are on our own, in all our thinking, in all our speaking, in all our living. May we bless your name and be a blessing to others. Amen. Our reading later in our service is a famous passage which talks about following Jesus, recognizing who Jesus is, so full of the Christ, and then being a follower of his. And the phrase that is used in that reading is the idea of taking up our cross. But the idea of taking up our cross is not about us sort of taking up that cross as an instrument of death, but is about the idea of following Jesus in his sacrificial way of living. And so for some of our activities this morning, I've sent out some stuff which is about following Jesus or following Christ in a different way. And one is a game. And so you can play a game if you've got a dice. There's a board that has been sent out, and you move your counter around the board, and every now and again you come to something which might ask you to miss a move, or you have to go ahead 2 spaces. And it's about the good things that we do that move us on in our following of Jesus. And the other is a sheet, and there's 2 ways of doing this. The sheet that I've given is one of a foot in a shape, well, a picture in the shape of a foot, and it's got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it says, this week I will follow Jesus by doing this. And so the idea is that you'll write in there something that you'll try and do this week each day, and as a sign that you following Jesus, what would you copy in Jesus's life to show that you are a follower of his? And every day you succeed, you colour it in, and maybe colour it in with a different colour, so you get the shade of the rainbow at the end of the week, showing how you have been a follower of Jesus. But another way of doing this kind of exercise would be to make, and maybe here's something for you, if you've got 7 bits of paper, draw around your own foot. And on your own foot, when you've cut it out, write down something that you think would be good to copy from the way that Jesus lived. And write that on your foot. So it might be something like, be kind. And you could have that, colour it in and have that for one day. And another day it might be, love your neighbour. It might be, do a good turn. Various things that you could do to be a follower of Jesus. And day by day you could put down one of those footsteps and try and live and show yourself as a follower of Jesus. We'll come back and we'll see if you've done any of those or any other activity that you wish this morning. Do not ever feel constrained by the things that we send out. If there are other things that you want to do, then that's absolutely wonderful. We're going to have a song which is kind of bit of a dance around song for anyone who wants to dance around. And it speaks of Jesus as being the one who we should follow. It's called One Way Jesus. So our reading this morning is from Mark's Gospel, chapter 8, beginning at verse 31. Jesus started teaching them that the son of Adam was destined to suffer a great deal and be rejected by the elders and the ranking priests and the scholars, and be killed, and after 3 days to rise. And he would say this openly. And Jesus took him aside and began to lecture him. But he turned, noticed his disciples, and reprimanded Peter verbally. Get out of my sight, you Satan, you, because you're not thinking in God's terms, but in human terms. After he called the crowd together with his disciples, he said to them, those who want to come after me should deny themselves, pick up their cross and follow me. Remember, those who try to save their own life are going to lose it. But those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the good news are going to save it. After all, what good does it do a person to acquire the whole world and pay for it with his life? Or what would a person give in exchange for life? Moreover, those who are ashamed of me and my message in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Adam will likewise be ashamed when he comes in his Father's glory, accompanied by holy angels. Amen. And so we turn to Marianne to hear some of her thoughts about this passage.
Good morning, everyone. Good to have this opportunity to share with you again. I think it was Beulah who said a few weeks ago that preachers might be tempted to avoid the difficult passages in the Bible, such as take up your cross. I don't know about Deborah this morning, but I certainly looked very hard at the other readings before I decided to do my reflection on this particular reading. But at the start of it, I want to acknowledge that it is a really difficult subject, and I don't feel like I've really got any answers. But just a reflection. I love the idea that this is called a reflection. I'm not teaching you. I'm not preaching at you. I'm just sharing my thoughts as I reflect on the passage. And as I was reflecting on the passage in preparation for today, I found myself asking a question which seems very relevant for this time. How can I take up my cross? How can I deny myself and lose my life for Jesus' sake, and yet still be kind to myself? Being kind to yourself, practicing self-care. I've got to say that during these lockdowns, they're kind of new terms to me, but they seem to be things that we're being urged to do a lot. And as Christians, I think some of us really struggle with that idea. Surely, in God's strength, we should be able to just cope with anything. We should be able to carry on. We should be able to keep caring for other people without stinting. And I see so many people who are apparently living self-sacrificing lives. And I wonder why I don't have that energy to keep on doing that. And if anyone else has been feeling the same, then I hope it's encouraging that we can just share openly that feeling together. So before I share my reflection on the passage, I wanted to just tell you one example of how I've been grappling with this in my own personal life recently. Over the past couple of years, I've been struggling with feelings of just being unable to cope, feeling exhausted and inadequate. And I'm sure it was a combination of lots of things going on in my life. As you know, I've got a small child. I've got a stressful job. I've got a husband with an even more stressful job. We're in the middle of a global pandemic and all the associated lockdowns. And I'm experiencing the perimenopause as well. And just on a side note, I thought it was interesting, Dan talked about last week transsexuals. See Dan smiling there, which is pretty unusual in a service. But I've never heard the menopause mentioned in a service either. And that's something that half of us go through. And it can have a really serious effect on women's health. And so I'd love to hear that mentioned more often. Anyway, after some persuading from various friends over the past year, I have been more kind to myself and I'm feeling better at the moment. I've had a bit of counselling. I've started HRT for the menopause. And the most difficult change of all for me, I'm sending Georgina to nursery for a few extra hours a week at a time when I'm not working, so that I can have a few hours to myself. And that was a real battle in my life to make that decision to do that, because I felt like I should be able to cope. I felt like I should just spend all my waking time working or caring for other people. And in a sense, I felt like I should be taking up my cross. But as I've been reflecting on this passage, I've realised that maybe my logic was a bit flawed and my perspective was a bit skewed. So back to the passage. Just listen again, maybe in different words to the reading we heard about what Jesus said to the crowd. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. We're just so familiar with that term, taking up your cross, aren't we? It's something that is used by people who aren't even Christians. It's hard to imagine what the people thought when they heard that for the first time. At that time, it was condemned criminals who were made to carry the crossbeam of their own cross to their crucifixion. And while they were doing that, there would have been crowds of people looking on and mocking them, or even worse. When you think of it, it's a really disturbing thought. But I guess it didn't really hit home with any of them until they saw for themselves or they heard about it when Jesus was enduring that very thing at his own crucifixion. Earlier in the passage, we heard how Jesus had just started to explain to his close disciples that this was to be his fate. He was to suffer, be rejected by the religious leaders, be killed, and resurrected. Imagine how shocking this was to them to hear that for the first time. Especially when Peter had just acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ. I think Peter would have spoken for any of us when he said something like, "Don't talk like that, Jesus. That's just ridiculous. That's not going to happen to you." But then, even more shocking, Jesus rebuked Peter in just the same way as they'd seen him rebuke demons. And he said, "Get behind me, Satan. You're setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. The Bible doesn't record the disciples' response to this. I guess there was a stunned silence. And this was just the start of them realizing that following Jesus didn't necessarily mean that their life would be easy. They wouldn't be protected from all harm. They may well face opposition, even from their leaders who they looked up to. And in a real way, they might be killed for their faith. Jesus then spoke to the crowds, and the crowds include us, Jesus' followers now. We have to be prepared for suffering if we're going to follow Jesus. It doesn't mean something's gone wrong. It doesn't mean we've gone the wrong way. But if we're following Jesus, we're often going to be going against the norms. People will misunderstand us, object to us. We'll be called to do difficult things such as caring for people in difficult circumstances, acting for justice, speaking up for our faith. So many different things, different to each one of us. We'll have to sacrifice time, energy, material possessions to follow Jesus. And being a Christian means that we acknowledge Jesus is in charge of our lives. We hand over control and we follow him. But on the positive side, if we're following Jesus, then we're with him all the time. And we've got that hope of resurrection with Jesus for eternity. Looking at this passage from Jesus' point of view, he was telling his disciples that he was going to be killed, and that was the first step towards, one step towards accepting that fact in his own life and making it happen. When we say things out loud, when we tell other people that we're going to do something, it makes it much more likely that it's going to happen, doesn't it? Like if you decide you're going to stop eating biscuits, if you tell everyone in your family, it makes it much more likely that you might do it. Taking up Jesus' literal cross was a choice for him. It wasn't something that was inevitable. And avoiding the route to taking up that cross was a temptation that he must have faced over and over again, not just in the wilderness, which is what we're thinking about during Lent. And because it was a temptation that he faced day in, day out, that must be why he reacted so strongly to Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan." He wasn't calling Peter Satan. He was realizing that this was another way of Satan tempting him to take the easy way. And he was modeling that behavior of taking up his cross, actively following God's plan. So what does this mean for us? What might taking up your cross mean? I think it means following Jesus wherever he leads. The activities that have been sent out today reflect that. I think it means following his teachings and his guidance in your own life. Don't evade your witness. Don't evade your own calling. Don't evade the good works that are prepared in advance for you to do, as it says in the Bible. Don't evade those for the sake of saving yourself. For example, you might want to save yourself from embarrassment or tiredness or effort. For some people, that would even mean saving themselves from lack of freedom, livelihood, or even saving their own life. But when you are following, make sure it's Jesus you're following, not your own self-imposed expectations or the expectations of other people. And be aware that being a true follower of Jesus can be hard, and that's normal. It doesn't mean that God's abandoned you because it's a difficult thing to do. I think it's also useful to consider what taking up your cross doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you have to carry everyone else's cross. It doesn't mean you have to be carrying a cross all of the time. Jesus spent time relaxing, partying. He spent times of quiet away from everybody. And these are important parts of everyone's life. Following Jesus involves having times of Sabbath rest. God has told us to do that. God's made us human. We need sleep. We need mental rest in our lives. And taking up your cross doesn't mean that if you don't feel you're carrying a cross at that particular moment, you need to go and find one to carry. Sometimes following Jesus isn't so difficult. There are wonderful times. And sometimes when life is difficult enough because you're going through an illness or some other difficulty, Jesus leads us to still waters and gives us a chance to recuperate. As long as Jesus is leading us, then we should be following. So, what's the answer to my original question? My original question was, how can I take up my cross, deny myself and lose my life for Jesus' sake, and yet be kind to myself? Don't think there's an easy answer, but maybe I should be kind to myself as long as it doesn't stop me following Jesus and being prepared to suffer in order to do that. I do believe it was God who showed me through Christians who I trust that I should take that time out for myself each week. It's so much what I need right now. And amazingly, because I'm doing that, that's what's allowed me to take out the time to write these reflections to share with you. And I've been thoroughly enjoying that challenge. So being kind to yourself really is part of God's plan.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for that. And yes, I don't think many of us mention the menopause in sermons. So thank you for that challenge to us all. And actually, it's a good reminder of how many other things we don't talk about in our sermons that we should actually tackle in our corporate worship. And so that's a challenge for all us preachers. But thank you very much for those words. Thank you for your Christian friends who've guided you wisely and enabled you to have that time to share those reflections with us. Some really, really kind of lovely thoughts. And I especially love that idea of looking at what it doesn't mean to take up our cross. I think that's a really, really good thing, because we often burden ourselves, I think, in all sorts of ways. And already we've got people commenting in our chat box of thanking you for words you said, for taking up this challenge. A good book to check out is A Culture of Kindness, says Paul, by Nala Summers, aimed at making working place kinder places, but lots of practical tips for us all. So some very, very wonderful thoughts. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm almost kind of hesitant now to introduce the next song, because it's a really kind of a very upbeat one. And although it does recognize that difficulty about sometimes taking up our cross and the challenges it brings, it possibly is a kind of more triumphant one that speaks of how we can do that when we know, as you said, Marianne, that we do have Jesus with us as our constant companion in that. And so this is Take Up Your Cross.
I just want to also say a big thank you to Marianne for her reflections this morning. She hit it right on the head. I'm also going to be talking about difficult conversations. So both of us have kind of looked at the text and realised that, you know, there are really difficult things to tackle in here. And when I talk about difficult conversations, I'm not talking about does my bum look big in this. I won't ask you about that one either. And again, I just want to go back a little bit to the few verses that should have been read before we heard this morning's reading, because it's pivotal to the whole of it. So we've got Jesus and his disciples. They're traveling around Caesarea Philippi. And as you do when anybody goes on a walk, you have time to talk about all sorts of things. And, you know, you kind of get relaxed, and it's actually a really good time to have some difficult conversations. It's a really good tool for new people into church to go for walks and just have time to, in an easy atmosphere, to talk. So there we are. We've got Jesus and his disciples wandering around Caesarea Philippi, having all these wonderful conversations. And then Jesus turns around and says, "Who do people say I am?" Well, that's quite a question to ask them, because he's Jesus, isn't he? You know, he's the guy that we've been following for the last however long. And so for a minute, it would maybe have stopped them in their tracks as they thought about it, but they did come up with some possible answers. And they include John the Baptist and Elijah and the prophets, because people were beginning to realize that this was no ordinary man. And you kind of look back into history to see who else has done this kind of work, and those are the names that would come up. But the bigger question is, who do you say that I am? And as Marianne's already mentioned, this is Peter's light bulb moment, because before engaging brain, he opens his mouth and he blurts it out, "You are the Messiah." There, the cat's out of the bag. It's been named. You are the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one of God. All three of those phrases mean the same. This is the man that we have all been waiting for. This is the one that God has promised us from long, long ago. And once Peter said it, the other disciples will have gone, "Oh my gosh, do you think he's got it right?" It could be, couldn't it? You know, that whole sense of, wow, this is an exciting moment. And they will have all felt something amazing because Peter has named it. He's actually put it out there. And what's fascinating is Jesus didn't turn around and say, "You stupid boy." All he did was say, "Can you just keep that to yourselves for a moment? Just hang on to that thought, because there's a lot of other stuff to come yet. The time isn't quite right." And then I don't know about you, but there have been many times in my life, and I think children maybe find this especially, you come home from school, you've had a fantastic day, or you've been to a birthday party, you come home and you've only been in the door 5 minutes and your mother tells you off. Or you've had a fantastic weekend and you come home and there's a message on the answer machine and it takes it all away. Well, I think here we are. We've got the disciples. They've had a fantastic moment, a pivotal epiphany moment. And they're excited. And then Jesus goes and spoils it all by talking about the struggles that lie ahead, about his impending death. Not the possibility that he might die in 10, 15, 20, 30 years away from now, but that this death is going to happen really soon. And it's not going to be nice. There are going to be people who will turn against him and those who follow him. And ultimately, he will be killed. And now I've got there. I've got to the difficult subject that I want us to have a little reflection on this morning. Because the reaction of Peter and the other disciples when we talk about death is not that much different to any family group. It says that Peter rebuked him. And he may have said to Jesus something along the lines of, "Master, that can't be right. You're just beginning to make a difference. You're just beginning to make a name for yourself. People are beginning to follow you. They're coming from all over the place to listen to what you've got to say. They're willing to learn from you. They're beginning to see that you make a difference in their life and that they can make a difference in others and in the life of this nation." Peter does what we all do when confronted with somebody who wants to talk about death. He kicks it into touch. Not going to discuss this. So I just want you all, and I'm really sorry if this is difficult for you, to actually acknowledge that I, you, me, we are all going to die. And I don't want you to think about that in a morbid sense, but just to acknowledge that this is something that none of us can avoid. And sadly, I believe that the coronavirus has brought this very clearly to all of our homes and to our thinking. However, there are ways of dying. And back in the good old days, sort of back end of the 19th century, a good death meant that you would die with your family all around you. The complete opposite of what's been happening recently, where people have been living and dying on their own because they're isolated. And as you think about that good death, your family may come and be around you for not just a short time, but for days on end, keeping you company, talking with you, round about you, about you. They would have been there in your bedroom or wherever the bed happened to have been. They would have heard your last words. And death was very much a part of everyday living. It happened regularly, not just to old people, but to young people, to children. Infant mortality was really high. So it was an everyday factor. Today, we don't talk about death. We use phrases to disguise the word. We talk about his passing, she passed. And then we've got the euphemisms of she kicked the bucket, gone over, fallen off the perch, gone to a better place, pushing up daisies, joined the celestial choir, met their maker, pegged it, shuffled off this mortal coil. And I'm sure you can think of plenty of others. And it drives me mad, absolutely mad, when reporters on the news start talking about the passing of Joe Bloggs. And they're not talking about football passing, they're talking about somebody who has died. Say it, name it. Because until we say it and we name it, we cause problems about meaning and what's happening. There's an anecdotal story of an anaesthetist. He was talking to a patient prior to their surgery. And his final words to this person were, "I'll see you on the other side, dear." Now, for him, that meant that he would see them after surgery in the recovery room, which was on the other side of the operating theatre. For the poor soul who was lying on the bed just about to be anaesthetised, that person thought he wasn't expecting her to live through this act of operating surgery. So went into theatre expecting to die. And then when that person woke up on the other side, wasn't quite sure whether the anaesthetist she was seeing had died also, and they're both in heaven. But you get what I mean. There's a nonsense about the way we talk about death. And actually, I'm going to pick up on the perimenopausal stuff. The comedian that used to both stand either side of the wall, I can't think of their names right now, but big, busty women, both men actually, but they were dressed up as women. And they'd stand there and they'd talk about having it, you know, well, all those problems, women's problems, down under problems. Never mentioned what it was. We all knew what they were talking about, but we need to name things if we're going to actually live full lives. Death is such an important subject that because families are not talking about it, those who are living with illnesses or maybe just want to talk about it now go to death cafes, set up in various places, very often attached to places like Martlets, to hospices, but actually places where people can come and talk through what it means to die, what they want to have done, how they want to share the news with families, what might happen at the end in terms of all the arrangements that are to be made. They want to rehearse what they have to say to their families. They can't talk about it otherwise. I remember a phone call from John's mum. It was while she was still living in sheltered accommodation. She hadn't yet moved into a nursing home. She said, "Deborah, I need you to come and see me. I need to talk to you." Well, that kind of lead into a conversation. I kind of guessed already what it was about. I got there and she said, "I need to talk to you about my death. I need to talk to you about what will happen. I want to tell you what I need people to know, because I can't talk to Margaret," which is John's sister, "and I certainly can't discuss it with Mike, because for both of them it was too raw. They didn't want it to happen. They could not cope." And she didn't think it was fair to talk to John about it, because that would put him in a different place with his sister and his brother. So it was me. Come and talk to me. So we had, I have to say, we had a wonderful afternoon. She sang through some of the songs, and the ones that she wanted, the ones she didn't want. We talked about the story from when she was a young girl all the way through to where she was now. We had a fantastic afternoon, I have to say it. We wrote down what she wanted me to know and what she wanted me to share with everybody else. It was a joyous afternoon, a difficult subject, but it wasn't as if she was dying right now, this moment. This was preparation work, so that when the time came and she was too ill to discuss it, everybody would know what she wanted. And I think it's important that we do talk about the difficult things in life, not just death. We need to talk about the climate change. We need to take seriously the effects that humans are having on the world we inhabit. Why are we looking to Mars when we can't even look after what we've already got? We need to listen to the scientists and act upon their advice. We need to talk about the arms trade and listen to those whose lives are affected by the fallout, and learn what we as individuals can do to make a difference. We need to talk about poverty, not just in other countries, but the poverty on our own doorstep. There is so much that actually we can make a difference on if we only talk about it. If we take up these things, as Miriam was saying, as our cross to bear, we can challenge and make a difference. What can we do to ensure that we play our part in setting people free to live fulfilled lives? Peter and the others needed to hear Jesus talk about the future, even though they didn't understand it, because later they would remember, and then they would have another light bulb moment when it all made sense. Everything that Jesus had talked about would suddenly become real. We too need to remember the Lenten stories, the journey, the walk towards Jerusalem, the events of Holy Week. Think about the people Jesus met on the way. Listen to those difficult stories, wrestle with them, try our best to make sense of them. A friend once said, "I can't do Holy Week, especially Good Friday. It's awful, it makes me feel sick." So putting aside the various reasons for the atonement and the various stories that are tied into the cross, we still need to think about it, what it means to us. Easter without Good Friday is meaningless. No death, no resurrection. And just remember, it wasn't a walk in the park for Jesus either. Lent is a good time to reflect and review our spiritual practices, to listen to God, to review the stories of Jesus, including the difficult ones, and acknowledge that he is the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one of God, the one who calls us to take up our cross and follow him. So do not be afraid of the difficult things, because we need Les. I've just got David Sharman, I just got it out the corner of my eye. Les Dawson and Roy Barraclough, thank you for that. And Ruth's also said the same thing. Thank you for reminding me. And just that image in my head of those two standing over their fences. Do not be ashamed. Do not be afraid. Talk about those things that are difficult, because in doing so, we may well be helping somebody else through a really difficult time. And I'm so glad that Marianne talked about perimenopausal stuff. So glad that, you know, that's out there. It happens, and it happens to one half of society. I'm afraid the others have got other problems. So I'm not saying it's one set or the other, but talk about these things. They matter, and they matter to all of us. And if we don't confront them and we don't deal with them, then we don't help ourselves at all. Because actually all of these conversations are rehearsals, and all of them bring us hope for a different future. And in helping people understand what we need, what others need, we can make a difference to so many people. And so I'm going to end there, and we're going to sing together now. Have you heard God's voice? And this talks really about the difficult things that we do have to confront as we become disciples of Christ and follow Jesus and walk with the cross to where he's taking us. Amen.
I think we've been richly blessed this morning by those two reflections, both so positive in all that they said, and just kind of talking about real life stuff, the challenges for us to be followers of Jesus, the challenges to us about having conversations that really matter with the people who really matter to us. But I urge you, if you are worried, afraid, if you like, of uncertain of having those kinds of conversations, do find someone who might be a safe person, a safe space for you to have those kinds of conversations with you. I know that as a minister, it is often those conversations about death that you have way before someone is going to die that are some of the richest conversations and most helpful conversations, I think, in people's lives as they prepare for things that will come, things that will happen in the future, even if it's not just around the corner. I think for both of you this morning, I just thank God for your thoughts and for your sharing with us in such a beautiful and honest way. Thank you. We're going to turn to our prayers now, and there are so many things that have come up this morning already that might be things that you want us to pray about, or that you will be using in your prayers, not just for today but this week. But this is another opportunity to write in the chat box those situations that you wish us to pray about, to remember in our prayers during the week. We thank Russell every week for putting them together in a list for us that we can then send out to people so they can continue to pray them during the week. I do remind you that it is always best to get permission from the people whose names you mention, rather than breaking any kind of confidences about the prayers that we might have and the people that we remember. But I do invite you to write your prayers in the chat box now, and as you do so, we'll listen to a song by a man called Andrew Witt, and it's called Compassion. Just want to pick up one of the comments in the prayer thing from Cathod Hayward, who is just a line of beautiful wisdom. When we're overwhelmed by so much, let us just do the next right thing. We might not be able to change the world, but we can change the world for a person, a situation. And so, as we offer our prayers to God, we pray in the words that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Then I think we'll turn then to our final hymn, and it's a hymn that asks us to commit ourselves again to following him. Number 673 in our hymn book. Will you come and follow me if I but call your name? A reminder that we will be open for coffee shortly. So if you wish to come and drink your coffee and have conversation with people from around the circuit, then please do find that link. It should be in your inbox. And also there is a link to a prayer or meditation service tonight, which is being led by Dan. That's at 6:30 tonight. So a warm invitation and about that. But I think Marianne and Georgina was kind of waving at Dan at that point just to say hi. Also a reminder that on Friday, there is the World Day of Prayer service. I'll get it right soon. I'll get my words in the right order, even if my teeth aren't. The World Day of Prayer service on Friday, and we will send out the link via the group worship link, so that anyone who wishes to join that will be able to do so. I think that's Friday. Is it afternoon at 2 o'clock? Okay, thank you, Deborah. And so our final blessing. Generous God, bless each one of us. Bless those we love. Bless the homes we belong in. And inspire us with your Spirit, that we might grow deeper in wisdom, more passionate in faith, more committed in our loving, for the sake of Jesus Christ. Amen.